Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville, with 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Welcome to another episode of Mike's on Mike. I'm Mike Miller, along with Mike Hightower here, and Mike Tolbert is back in his remote studio. We're broadcasting today from the lovely library of the Jacksonville History Center, and our thanks, of course, to Alan Bliss and his fine staff for allowing us to use his facility, and, of course, our thanks to all the donors who keep this broadcast going and keep our lights on and our cameras rolling. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our guest has been on now 4 times. And always as an outstanding columnist, either for the Florida Times-Union or when he moved over to the USA Today Network. But this time, Nate Monroe is joining us in the infancy of his brand new gig as executive editor of the Tributary, another one of our favorite news organizations. I think it's worth reading what Florida politics reporter A.G. Gankarski wrote about Nate and his move to the Tributary. Quoting now, Monroe has hardware attesting to his skills and track record, including having taken the Francis DeVore Award for Public Service and the Lucy Morgan Award for in-depth reporting from the Florida Press Club. He also winning the Sunshine State Awards Reporter of the Year, earning a share of the 2017 Integrity Florida Award for Public Corruption Reporting and for the Society of Florida Professional Journalists, Florida Chapter, and a share of the Florida Press Club's Freedom of Information Award in 2016. Nate, welcome back to Mike's on Mike. Congratulations on your move, and we can't wait to find out more about it.
Welcome back. And congrats on the new gig. You've been looking forward to it, yeah.
Nate, first of all, thank you for the 11-plus great years of reporting and column writing that you did for the Times-Union, and just as important, that you did really for Jacksonville. And congratulations on your new job. Can't wait to hear more about it. My first question is pretty obvious. At the TU, you were the big brother on the block, and then when you moved over to the USA Today, you had columns weekly, almost daily, in so many newspapers. I know why the Tributary wanted to hire you, but tell me why you made this move. Why did you move to the Tributary?
You know, I appreciate the question, Mike, and thank you again for those kind words. I felt like a change was something I wanted for a while. I had always, in my mind, looked at the conclusion of the JEA trial as a pretty natural kind of demarcation in my mind, and saying I wanted to see that through. And once I see that through, I want to maybe figure out, what's next. The thing about, there's a lot about the Tributary I found appealing, but part of it is it was a chance to kind of, move up in a way, do something different, kind of get back to investigative journalism. And I get to do all that while staying in Jacksonville. People, I'm sure there are folks who, would never believe this, but, my wife and I really like living here, and, we're not super eager to move. So this was just like a really good blending of circumstance, time, opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunity with the Tributary to grow it, to do a lot of fun work. That's kind of the short version.
How did you see your career in journalism move from 11 years ago to now?
I got into the business. I graduated from college and went to a newspaper in 2010. 2010 is not exactly when the bottom sort of fell out, but it wasn't very long before that, right? So I've only ever really known the winter in the newspaper industry, okay? But 15 years ago, memories of the summer were still fresh. There were still people around who worked in a much more prosperous environment for newspapers, and newspapers themselves continued to operate kind of like they had in the previous century. So all of which is to say, when I got to the Times-Union was smaller than it had been maybe in the early 2000s, but it was still a substantial, major city daily newspaper. And so the newsroom had like 100 people in it. And we had a huge printing press, and we were really better understood as a publishing company that had a newspaper. We were just a news. Yeah. So we were a publishing company, and we like made stuff. We had an industrial site on the river, and so it was like it's just a fundamentally different business than it is today, which is a kind of digital first newspaper that it lives online. It's still delivered daily, but far less than it had been in the past, and it's printed out of town now and trucked in instead of just being printed right on the dock. So and the newsroom is much smaller.
Right. And some of those people that you worked with that were your mentors. Some of those folks must have been.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And some of them still work at the paper. One thing the Times Union is very lucky to still have is people like David Bauerlein and Beth Reese-Cravey and Steve Patterson. I mean, these are people who have worked at the paper for decades. So there is a lot of institutional knowledge even now in that newsroom, and that's something a lot of newspapers don't have anymore.
Right.
And so that's like a good, it's great that the Times Union still has that. And I learned from all of those folks. One of the real pleasures was getting to work closely with Steve and David on various stuff over the years. Learned a lot from them.
What is causing this metamorphosis, going from what we've always considered to be the traditional media now into, areas that we're all learning from because we really don't have a lot of experience in, like podcasting, Paul?
Yeah, I guess, all of the above is maybe an answer. People's consumption habits have changed dramatically over the past several decades, right in line with, technology being vastly different than it was even 10 years ago. All of that, when you think about being a newspaper in this day and age, it's harder to reach audiences because, people just they're not accustomed to even reading the news every day anymore. And so, there are challenges with the newspaper business model. It's not breaking news. And so, for our part, we see an opportunity. Investigative journalism is expensive and it takes time. It's not something that, I can promise a shareholder a lot of value in. And so that's why, we see opportunity in the nonprofit space. We view journalism as a public service. And I think, the news that the Times Union produces is a public service too. Mm-hmm. And so, we view what we do as a public service and treat it as such.
Gankarski wrote about high-impact journalism. Tell me a little bit about that, because you said you want to get back into high-impact journalism and also want to broaden the boundaries of the Tributary to go statewide. Tell us your vision.
Yeah, we want to do, first of all, part of our core mission is to say, where are there gaps in coverage? And often that gap is going to be, there isn't as much investigative and enterprise reporting as there had been in previous years. And it's not just, picking on newspapers, but the news industry is challenged. And we've seen, veterans of the TV stations leave in the past couple of years. So, it's kind of across the board. We do see less, enterprise and investigative journalism. So when we're looking for stories, we look at something and say, what value can we bring to this story? Do we feel like, one place I think the Tributary has carved out a place for itself, at least locally, is criminal justice. Criminal justice has probably always been a little bit undercovered. And so that's kind of a natural area for us to go, okay, some of these stories are complicated. They take a long time. And we think we can bring value to that. We have some experience covering those issues. And so that's a thing we'll continue to do. We do want to explore what orienting ourselves more as a Florida news organization would look like this year. So, for example, Mike, I see an opportunity maybe in covering our regulated industries in Florida, like the utility sector.
Thank you.
There's, multiple newspapers used to have a person that just covered utilities and the Public Service Commission, and that's just not a thing anymore. And so I think there is space for that, among other things. So we're gonna play around and experiment a little bit this year with what being a statewide organization would look like, but we're also try to do the work on the ground here too. So that will be my challenge.
If there are no watchdogs, if there is no one to say what's going on, then people are going to push that envelope. Would you not agree?
Oh yeah, of course.
And it's getting worse and worse.
Yes. And, you know, we see it on our side. Access to public records in the state is the worst, I think, that it's ever been. You know, these agencies can take months to get back to you, even for like just an invoice on what these records are going to cost. The costs are enormous. So you can either pay them or go to court, but that's expensive. And you know, when you're in a daily paper, you know, you're kind of in the grind, you know, and it can be hard to keep on something and kind of bird dog it. So part of my hope is being a little bit unmoored from the daily journalism model. We can take the time, you know. If the state wants to tell me some records will take 8 months, okay, I'll still be here.
In AG's article, you were quoted as saying the Tributary wants to reach, quote, non-traditional audiences, and you want to use alternate storytelling formats. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, so part of what I was talking about there is, first of all, reaching new audiences, but, you know, that code speak for, like, we want to reach younger readers. We want to, you know, part of having a more engaged, healthy civic life is, you know, to make sure people know what's going on. And part of that is on us, making, you know, doing our best to get our journalism in front of people. So the old model is you write a story, it goes to print, it goes out in the world, you're done and you move on. Now we write a story, we publish it, but then we want, you know, a social media strategy to roll it out on, you know, different platforms and to get it in front of people. And, you know, on Instagram, the way you promote a story will look different than the way you promote it on Twitter. And then it will look when you promote it on Blue Sky and Facebook. And so part of it is, you know, we want to be, you know, getting our journalism in front of people. And to do that, that just takes work and planning all on its own. We've talked about doing some live events with our stories. So, you know, Nicole, our senior investigative reporter, is working on something I hope we might publish by the end of the month. She's been working on this since last year. This thing goes out into the world. Maybe we have an event, you know, at a brewery and do a panel talk with her about, you know, the kind of story behind the story. We let readers ask her questions about things she found, like thinking in kind of different ways about how to get that work in front of people is really what I was getting at there.
One of the things that you're doing, at least you talked about it with Yankarski, which I really thought was interesting, is this idea of making your information available to traditional media outlets in some way. So does that mean you become a 1099 freelance, if you will, resource for traditional media?
The Tributary has already done this, and this is already the case with all of its past work. You know, we publish under, I think it's a Creative Commons license. So any news station can run our stuff for free. As long as we're accredited, they can, you know, a newspaper could run our stuff. And we do that as part of our view that this news is a public service, right? We've all seen, I've seen complaints over the years from readers sort of saying, hey, I'd love to read this story, but I don't have a subscription. It sounds like some useful information. And I have always sympathized with those concerns. You know, papers, I think, have a right to charge for the work that they do. Again, this stuff costs a lot of money. I think one of the advantages we have as a nonprofit that I want to take full advantage of is just that, you know, we're not so concerned about that. We want the stuff we do to be available to everybody who needs to see it.
And it's good for your credibility when they pick it up and attribute it to you. I mean, it's a win-win in a lot of ways. The more that you get, the stronger you become.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, we also, something I said in that story you've quoted from is that, you know, we don't view newspapers as our competitors. Like, we view them are on the same team. And we actually, you know, hope to, and we already are actually doing this, work even more directly with some existing publications or, you know, even TV stations. If we think there's a story that that a partnership would bring some value to, like, we do not hesitate to reach out. We're working on a follow-up story on something with the Miami Herald right now. I told you before we started, we might partner with another news nonprofit on some stuff I've been looking at. So, partnerships are great. And like I said, in addition to making our stuff available for free, we also want to proactively work with some of these organizations.
How are you going to achieve that ambition? I mean, if you're going to go statewide, or you said it's expensive, pull back burden, how are you going to do that? Or be able to afford that?
So I have found that a lot of the work that I do in this new role, a lot of it is non-journalism related. Ultimately, my biggest mandate is to help make sure that journalism is there, and we're actually giving people something to, that we're actually kind of producing the stuff that we say we want to do. But also a part of my job is that kind of, almost more administrative kind of stuff.
Right.
In your final Times Union column, you wrote, Jacksonville is a place that simply happens to people. You come here for what you think might have been a year or two. Boy, can I identify with this, my friends. And then bam, before you know it, in my case, you've been here for 30 years. In your case, it's been over a decade. That's more or less your story. You said, I want to know, how did Jacksonville happen to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I came here for work. I came here for the newspaper job, and, really liked it. And it, made really good friendships here. And this is just what happens when you become an adult. You build a life, and, it's tough to walk away from that. The 24-year-old me would be very, very angry with the 36-year-old me for still being here. But
that's what I say about the 50-year-old me.
We're going to stop there. Okay, it's having got here in 1957.
But and that's also probably true of Florida too, right? Like, this is a state of transience.
Yeah.
I view that as a it's,
well, we blame the weather here. When you come down here, initially
right.
you're here for the weather,
right? Of course, I grew up on the deep south, so none of that was new to me.
I did too, south side of Chicago.
It's a little different.
You and Culver have a lot in common.
So yeah, I do. I think it's a place that happens to people. I know a lot of people like myself that came here for work, and you wake up the next day and you've been here for 12 years or 15.
What do you find special about this place?
I like the diversity is great. Having a beach is, really cool. Beaches, communities are amazing. That's just something not a lot of, big cities actually have. And I do, I hate the word, but everybody feels that there is potential here that is untapped. And I still do believe that is the case. Jacksonville still has a kind of like undiscovered quality to it, which is cool.
My old boss, Mike Blaylock, used to ask the question, what does Jacksonville want to be when it grows up? Do we know yet?
One of the legacies, I think, of consolidation is that it's made it very hard, I think, for the city to have any kind of collective identity. And I sometimes feel like it's tough to build civic momentum for things. So I think that is a challenge, and I do think there's not like some easy solution to this, and maybe other cities struggle with it too. I'm not an expert in other cities, but I sometimes feel like Jacksonville really struggles with this question of identity because it is so large and because it is quite disconnected. This is a driving city. All of these cool neighborhoods are really cool, but they exist very separate from one another. I mean, Murray Hill is a hike from Riverside somehow, but they're right next to each other. It's just, that can be a frustrating part of living here sometimes.
See, I see it not as a struggle. I think that's the part that makes it so unique, because it doesn't have an identity. If you really want to do something, maybe it takes a while for the momentum, but the difference between Murray Hill and Avondale is apples and baseball bats, or San Marco and Mandarin. Two different communities, still part of the same city. So I think maybe we don't have an identity, but for people who are, I think there's still the opportunity for everyone of us to make a contribution. You make a contribution. We'll talk about that. But everybody makes a contribution. I think you go into some cities like a Tampa or Orlando or something like that where the hierarchy is there. You can't break out of it. You can't break in it. and it's very hierarchical.
It's that way in Chicago.
Yes, I mean,
Definitely that way in Chicago.
a young reporter coming into Chicago. I mean, you've made a reputation for yourself, And
Well, Jacksonville is changing. I mean, the migration here and the in-migration of young, bright, ambitious people is changing the city. In 10 years from now, the Jacksonville, the three of us have grown up and know it's not going to be the Jacksonville. I hope a lot of the same great qualities are there, but I'm now working with the Jacksonville City Council, which you know very well, Nate. And in the past, that's been a secretive organization where it was run from the top, even though they had members. It's turned inside out now, so that these folks are working on long-term strategies to change Jacksonville into a world-class city. So there's a lot of that energy going on across Jacksonville, not just with the Civic Council, but so many other groups. And there's some dynamic leaders out there, some that weren't there 5 years ago, but are there now, 10 years ago, but are there now. So I think something really nice and big is about to happen in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
That I hope will make it even better.
Yeah.
Let me ask the final question.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't let this opportunity get by without asking you about your buddy Aaron Zahn. Tell me pretty much what went through your mind on what you felt like when you heard that Zahn was finally in prison.
I cared and care about government accountability. I think, people should be held responsible for the bad things that they do. At the same time, and, I really mean this, like, I don't take any pleasure in a guy, like, being sent to prison. That is, he has been held accountable. And I believe that before the trial, I mean, all the weight of all of this stuff must really be terrible. And, part of our job is to always keep front and center that, these are people at the end of the day, and it doesn't take away, it's not a defense of their actions or anything. But, I sincerely hope he comes out of it, better, and, wish nothing for him but, to get right and, be happy as he moves forward.
He made decisions.
I hope he comes out of it taking responsibility.
Bingo. Accountability.
Yes. But, to your point, I appreciate your compassion, but you were doing your job. He wasn't doing his job. And I think when you look at what the judge said, he made choices. And like all of us, sure, we are held accountable for those choices. No one forced him as we should do that. And from my personal perspective, I don't think he was a Lone Ranger, but the wheels of justice said he was the Lone Ranger. Being close to that, I just respectfully disagree with that outcome. But that's a separate issue. But I wish him well. I hope it works out for him. But he made those choices.
Tell us about the reception that the Tributary is planned for you later on this month.
Yeah, here it's at a brewery.
Yes, it is at a brewery just down the road. So we're really lucky to have Evan Smith. He is the founder of the Texas Tribune, which I think is one of the most successful news nonprofits in the country. He is a supporter of ours, and he's going to come into town and is going to participate. I guess as a reception for me. I kind of thought the event was more like here's Evan Smith, and no, you're a Q&A. Here's me. I opened the email like you guys did and saw my face there, so I guess it's for me.
It is. He's the special guest, but you're the very special guest. Well, both Mr. Hightower and I will be there. We're not sure if
lovely.
Mr. Tolbert can come in town for it or not, but we hope he will. But we're all looking forward to it.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
I prefer to meet Nate at a bar at the beach. It's me and him.
As long as you're open, as long as you're paying, you can meet him wherever you want.
There you go.
Hope you'll join us next week. Our guest is going to be Robert Peake from the Jacksonville Port Authority. As you know, we've been talking tariffs and tariffs and tariffs. Panama Canal, Panama Canal, Panama Canal. Well, how is that going to impact our local port? Is it going to mean more business for us, less business for us? what are we going to be doing? So we hope you will join us for it. Next week, Robert Peake will be joining us here on Mike's on Mike's. That's going to do it for this week. Our thanks to Dr. Alan Bliss, of course, and his fine staff for allowing us in to once again his wonderful center here. Hopefully you'll come and visit. It's a wonderful place to really peruse and browse and have a good time in finding out about the history of our city. And we thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all again next week. Take care.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Tolbert, Mike Hightower, and Mike Miller can be found on your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook, and YouTube. Visit the website at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversation with Mike's on Mike.